I cannot be silent.
Back when Eisenhower was the president, golf courses is where most of his time was spent. So I never really listened to what the president said, because in general I believed that the general was politically dead. But he always seemed to know when the muscles were about to be flexed, because I remember him saying something, mumbling something about a military-industrial complex.
As I have walked among the desperate, rejected, and angry young men, I have told them that Molotov cocktails and rifles would not solve their problems. I have tried to offer them my deepest compassion while maintaining my conviction that social change comes most meaningfully through nonviolent action. But they ask, and rightly so, what about Vietnam? They ask if our home nation wasn't using massive doses of violence to solve its problem, to bring about the changes it wanted. Their questions hit home, and I knew that I could never again raise my voice against the violence of the oppressed in the ghettos without having first spoken clearly to the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today, my own government. For the sake of those boys, for the sake of this government, for the sake of the hundreds of thousands trembling under our violence, I cannot be silent.
Each one reach one, each one time.
I cannot be silent.
Nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something. Everyone must play a part. Everyone's got to go to work. Work for peace. Spirit say work.
I cannot be silent.
Empowering the body, mind, and spirit. This is We Cannot Be Silent with Phil Restino and Larry Pinkney.
Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to the April 12th, 2014 episode of We Cannot Be Silent with Phil Restino and Larry Pinkney. And I'm Phil Restino, and our co-host Larry Pinkney will be along in a minute. But this is UnitedWeStrike.com's monthly radio marathon, and it's the second Saturday of each month on UnitedWeStrike.com. And the motto is, don't buy, don't comply, ask why. And basically that's to check out of everything that we're plugged into. And it really is kind of neat if you can do that. And you realize how much we are controlled. Tonight, Larry and I have been given an extra half hour, so our program's going to be 1 hour long, and that's allowed us to get asked to have a guest on. And boy, do we have somebody special for y'all tonight, and that's former CIA asset turned whistleblower turned political prisoner under the Patriot Act. Her name is Susan Lindauer. And I just want to read a little bit about Susan to introduce you all. Susan Lindauer, a U.S. intelligence asset. Susan Lindauer covered anti-terrorism at the Iraqi embassy in New York from 1996 up to the invasion of Iraq. Independent sources have confirmed that she gave advance warnings about the 9/11 attack. She also started talks for the Lockerbie trial with Libyan diplomats. Shortly after requesting to testify before Congress about successful elements of pre-war intelligence, Lindauer became one of the first non-Arab Americans arrested on the Patriot Act as an Iraqi agent. She was accused of warning her second cousin, White House Chief of Staff Andrew Card, and Secretary of State Colin Powell that war with Iraq would have catastrophic consequences. Gratis of the Patriot Act, her indictment was loaded with secret charges and secret evidence. She was subjected to 1 year in prison on Carswell Air Force Base in Fort Worth, Texas, without a trial or hearing, and threatened with indefinite detention and forcible drugging to shut her up. After 5 years of indictment without a conviction or guilty plea, the Justice Department dismissed all charges 5 days before President Obama's inauguration. And there's a great video of Susan telling her story at an event in Portland, Oregon in August of 2011. And that can be found at Susan's website, which is named after her wonderful book, Extreme Prejudice. And the website is extremeprejudice.wordpress.com. And before we bring Susan on air, I just want to make sure we have our partner in crime here, Larry Pinkney. Larry, are you with us?
Yes, of course. I'm here. And I want to welcome Susan as our guest for today. So go ahead.
Thank you, Larry.
Great. And, Susan, we want to thank you so much for coming on with us, especially on such short notice. And we do know that you yourself do quite a bit on the radio with your own radio program, the Covert Report, if I pronounced that correctly.
That's right, on Truth Frequency Radio, and I'm loving it. I'm talking. I've got all kinds of great guests. I had Mike Harris on today. I've got some Eastern Ukrainian activists on with me tomorrow. I like to try to go inside and behind the headlines, because what my experience has taught me is that nothing the government tells you is ever true. Absolutely, there's not a single word that comes out of their mouths. I'll give you an example. Colin Powell, many of you know that Colin Powell has griped endlessly about how no one at mid-level intelligence level tried to warn him about the bad intelligence coming out of the Iraqi exiles before his big speech at the United Nations, and how it was really loaded with, crammed with garbage. Well, I did go tell him. This is an example. This is just one example. I did go tell him. He lived next door to my CIA handler, and I went to him twice in January of 2003, a month before his speech, and again a second time a week before his speech at the United Nations. So he had plenty of time. He knew very well who I was, because my CIA handler lived next door to him. And he turned those papers over to the FBI. He told them to shut me up. Andy Card, who is my cousin, who was the chief of staff to George Bush, he backed up Colin Powell. So the two of them, between having the Secretary of State and the White House Chief of Staff coming after you, I was just screwed to the wall, as you can imagine. And of course, Colin Powell, he didn't have any integrity. He just wanted to whitewash the blood and guts and dirt off his reputation, so that he could, protect his legacy. And he should have been court-martialed for lying to his fellow officers.
Yes, and that was the and Colin Powell's holding up that little vial of white powder, and the fact that he was Colin Powell pretty much sealed the invasion of the U.S. invasion of Iraq, didn't it?
Yes,
as far as the legitimacy. Yes,
it did. And then he dared to come back and say, "Why didn't anyone tell me it would be bad intelligence? Oh, how did you damaged my reputation by not telling me the truth?" And I did tell him the truth. We had a peace option on the table, and it's worth noting that my conviction is this: there is never a point when diplomacy cannot achieve results. If you have courage, vision, and leadership to recognize that you need results, And if you're creative about approaching it, and what you find is that the other side, the guys you think are the bad guys, frequently have wonderful ideas of their own to contribute. A lot of people are surprised to hear that Saddam Hussein, a year before the invasion, mind you, not the last minute, a year before the invasion, Saddam had expressed a willingness to retire to a villa in Tikrit. And he had someone I was in Baghdad, and I got they actually arrested me. This was one of the charges against me in my indictment, which was true. I did take a trip to Baghdad. The fact is that I had asked the White House, and I had documentation requesting permission to go to Baghdad, and I had offered not to go if they did not want me to go. So I had indicated that I would obey their finding, and notifying them and telling them that, you know, if you don't want me to go, please just let me know. I want to be helpful. If this is going to be a problem, I won't do it. So, I mean, you know, I again, you see that it's when it's convenient. And I should have gone to Baghdad. I was the chief CIA asset covering Iraq at the United Nations. My trip took place a year before the invasion, when we were trying to get the weapons inspectors in, and I had done those negotiations, and I was clinching. I had done those negotiations at the United Nations, and it was after I finished it. I mean, imagine if you'd been told this. Would I have been convicted? After I finished the talks, I had achieved every single thing the United States wanted, and the CIA had dictated very harsh terms. I took this to the United Nations Security Council, and we had documentation because of the Patriot Act and because of the wires on my phone and on my fax, we actually had copies of all the faxes that I had sent to the United Nations. So we had my copies of my letters to the Russians, to the French, to the Arab League, to Egypt, and you know, some of these other governments that had a demonstrated interest. I would have been able. I am a historical record, yes. And so the prosecution was at first imagined that they would use this information to damage me and attack me and say, well, you were an Iraqi agent because you sent this out. You sent these letters saying that we could have detailing the peace option to the United Nations Security Council, but all of the advantages were for the United States. The fact that the United States would have preferential contracts in oil production, the Iraqi pipeline, for example, pipeline system network, pumping stations were completely destroyed under the sanctions and were just totally degraded and required massive reconstruction. The United States was going to have preferential contracts to rebuild all of the oil infrastructure, pipelines, pumping stations. They were going to buy U.S. oil equipment. We were going to have preferential contracts in hospitals, healthcare, pharmaceuticals. They had to rebuild their hospital system because, again, medical coverage had been destroyed by the sanctions. We were going to get those benefits. For us, the CIA drove a very hard bargain, and Saddam agreed to every darn thing we wanted. And a year before the invasion, I had traveled to Baghdad to talk about the weapons inspections. Iraq had already agreed before 9/11 to invite the FBI to send a task force on terrorism into Baghdad with authorization to conduct terrorism investigations, interview witnesses, and make arrests. They had already agreed. After 9/11, they tried to give us financial documents on where Al-Qaeda was hiding its money, where the terrorist network was hiding its money. Most of it comes from drug sales. So we would have killed two birds with one stone. Bush refused to take it. I mean, these were kinds of things that whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, whether you're progressive anti-war or conservative, pro-Republican, people have a right to know this information because all of these government officials are making decisions in our names. But Saddam, sorry, I keep coming back, getting sidetracked. The last thing, the big deal was that Saddam had offered to retire to a villa in Tikrit. And all he said he wanted was a security detail from the Iraqi Republican Guard. and he just wanted to go off and live his life and be left alone. And a year before the invasion, you could have had regime change.
Yes, and this is very important, Susan. I'm sorry to interrupt. Just to back up a little bit, and for those listening who might not be familiar with the run-up to the war on Iraq and the dealings in the intelligence behind it, you were an intelligence asset, and it seems like you were doing the job that you were tasked to do, which was to try to broker an agreement instead of war.
We had to get as everything that we could for the United States. From the end of the Clinton administration up to the invasion, it was obvious to the intelligence community that this international loathing of sanctions on Iraq had reached an epidemic. It could not be sustained. Now, I hated sanctions anyway because sanctions were brutal genocide. These were war crimes. 11,000 human beings were dying every month in Iraq, and half of them were children under the age of 5. Children under the age of 5 should not be dying of starvation in any country. Mm-hmm. And we had killed over 1 million children under the age of 5. The United Nations refused to count 6-year-olds or 7-year-olds. They were only counting the tiny babies. And before the war, 400 children had died in Iraq every month. But now, after sanctions, 11,000 human beings and 8,000 children were dying. So it was an offense against the humanity, as far as I was concerned, and I wanted to do something about it, and that's why I was willing to be recruited as an intelligence asset. I had been emphatic that I would never give up my beliefs. I was always anti-war. I was always I wanted to show that anti-war and anti-terrorism could achieve results, and if I believed that we would have more success in dealing with the Arabs if we applied a policy of nonviolence in all directions. In other words, I don't care who's doing the killing, I don't care who's doing the dying, I am opposed to violence. And I actually won a lot of support from Saddam and Gaddafi. They were at first amazed by this novel concept from the Americans, but what they found was that they were very eager to cooperate. Once you show respect for their people, and I would include the Palestinians in this, opposition to Israeli apartheid against the Palestinians, which I realize is controversial in some quarters, but I believe in it strongly. Once you show that you care about the quality of life in their communities, they will help you. And they were very, Gaddafi, our mission, our operation with Gaddafi cleared all of the terrorists out of Libya, because we held out a hand to Libya that they could rejoin the international community if they would stop supporting, and they were a real sanctuary for terrorists like Somalia.
Yes. And just to clarify, Susan, you were not a rogue agent, were you?
No.
You were doing what you were asked to do by your handlers, the CIA.
I had a CIA handler and a defense intelligence handler. I met every week with my CIA handler, and I met sometimes twice a week with my defense intelligence handler.
So there are good people trying to do the right thing in government.
And they are very, and I will tell you that both of those gentlemen, they did not give a damn about sanctions. I was the one who cared about sanctions. They were concerned about terrorism. And Paul Hoven, who was my defense intelligence handler, said that he had fought in Vietnam. And he had been a chopper pilot, helicopter medevac, and he had flown over 1,300 hours in combat, pulling men out of, men died in his arms. And he was a ferocious neocon, ferociously conservative man, and pretty much hated the Arabs, if you want the truth. But he believed that war, he would not be a Veterans for Peace kind of guy. He was a soldier of fortune kind of guy. But he believed that war should never be undertaken except as an absolute last resort, because he really didn't care if the Arabs died, but he cared if we died.
Yes.
And he didn't want to see any American soldier die for a stupid cause if it could be avoided.
Right.
And so we had believed, truly, I had been educated to believe that Colin Powell, as a fellow Vietnam veteran, would be, and as the head of the Joint Chiefs, he was, Colin Powell, before he was Secretary of State, had been head of the Joint Chiefs and had a stellar career, and that he would support a concept of building a peace option that had to be favorable to the United States. We had to be able to maximize every possible advantage for the United States in order for it to work. But what we found was that the Iraqis, as soon as they knew what we wanted, they'd give it to us. They'd say, absolutely, sure, we'll give that to you. Saddam wanted peace. He wanted to retire. There was never any reason. This was one of the this has got to be one of the stupidest wars in history, completely avoidable. And when I happen to live near Walter Reed, very close to Walter Reed, we share a metro, and I will tell you, it pained me through that war to see officers coming to visit Walter Reed in their military uniform with tears in their eyes on our metro, on the subway, just lockjawed in so much pain. And I had been a defense intelligence asset, and so it surprises people, but I really do respect the military a lot, and I respect those guys, and I care about the quality of our military. I just am against killing people. I'm anti-war.
Yes, and the thing here that what you're telling us, Susan, it illustrates pretty clearly to me and probably Larry as well, that what you were doing, was the honest thing, and you were carrying out the task that was assigned to you. But the fact that all this was discussed and negotiated, and the attack on Iraq and the war on Iraq still happened, says to me that the war on Iraq was what was really wanted to begin with. And you go to, Larry could probably expand on this a little more. When you get to the level of a Colin Powell in that position, when you make it up to the Joint Chiefs of Staff or generals, my suspicion is if they're not playing ball with the people above them, which is really, and if I'm not mistaken, who controls them, the powers that be that make out on these wars.
And Cheney.
Right. And they've got the forces that influence them that benefit from these wars. Larry, maybe you can pick it up from here and the whole Colin Powell thing and the whole idea of...
Well, I'd like to add something about that, which is very important, which is not included in my book, and I wish that it was. Every so often I realize that I left out an important detail. One of the I have been very hard on the Republican Party. I will tell you that. If you read my book, you'll know that I beat up Congress, both Republicans and Democrats, pretty aggressively. And it felt good to do it. But some people think that I'm harshest on the GOP because it was Bush and Cheney. But I would like to give a compliment to Representative Congressman Darrell Issa of California. He is the only... I was going around Capitol Hill for the year before the war. I didn't wait until the last 6 weeks. I was doing this, as soon as I came back from Baghdad, I was doing this, going around debriefing Congress about the peace option. And Darrell Issa was the only member of Congress who actually invited a general to attend one of the debriefings. And it was very interesting because it was a general on the Joint Chiefs. And what they did was they invited him at the same time that I was invited. And then Darrell Issa, I remember him being framed in the doorway with his legislative director or chief of staff standing there listening. And the Joint Chiefs was sitting on the other side of the waiting room, or the foyer, and I was on the other side, and so it was like a triangulation. And I was talking about what the peace option looked like and how Saddam Hussein's government was willing to give us everything we wanted, and that that this was actually a great success, and Americans did not have to kill a single soldier. That whether we were deployed, I think this was before we actually started to be deployed in the Gulf, but it was after the weapons inspections started. So it was like right in the 6 months, the 3 or 4 months before the war. It was probably December, probably about November, December. Before the invasion in March. So the military buildup had started, and I was arguing that we could have a great victory and that we didn't, even though we had spent the money, and at this point it was about spending money. We had spent money to deploy the soldiers, so gosh, shouldn't we go ahead and use them? And I said, well, you can achieve everything and call it a victory without killing a single soldier or blowing up anybody. You don't have to use up your military arsenal. We've won. And the general listened with a taut face to every single thing I said. And then later on, by January, February-ish, members of the Joint Chiefs began to resign. They said that they could not back the president. They did it graciously, and it was a dignified exit. But those generals who could not support the war were stepping down because they just couldn't do it. They could not back this huge, terrible war. And I remember seeing that one of the generals from the Joint Chiefs who did resign was, without question, the man who listened to the debriefing in Darrell Issa's office.
That meeting that you were involved in.
That I was involved
in,
that I delivered. And it was not supposed to be a formal debrief. You see what I mean? It was all kind of like on the QT.
Yes.
But I respect, even though I don't always like his politics, I respect Congressman Issa for having the integrity to to let the military hear the choice and to understand, to give them that opportunity. Because nobody else cared about what the military had to say. We send these men off to fight, these men and women off to fight, but we don't care what happens to them. This is about profit. It is about a military-industrial complex. It's Halliburton, and we have wiped out our middle class. We've bankrupted ourselves. We've broken our military. We don't have. I am a huge believer that before we fight any more wars, we've got to provide social services, medical services, VA services, whatever those soldiers need, we have to take care of them and their families. We don't have pensions for these people. They don't have jobs. Many of the times they have such bad post-traumatic stress, their lives are wrecked, and they can't. They need a lot more support than we're able to give them. Let's put it that way.
Yes, and Larry and I discussed this phenomenon quite a bit on our program, Susan. Larry and I are on once a month on the half-hour broadcast here with UnitedWeStrike.com, and then we also broadcast a 2-hour program on the third Monday night of each month on WolfSpiritRadio.com, and the idea is to not have any more disabled veterans in the first place, and that is to go to the source of who's creating these wars and following the money. And boy, we're more than halfway through the program already, and haven't even given Larry a chance to say hello hardly. Larry, are you still with us?
Yeah, of course.
Great. Why don't you jump in and talk to Susan a little bit yourself? I'm sure you have some questions you'd like to ask her.
Okay, thanks, Phil. First of all, I want to thank you again, Susan, for being our guest this evening. let me just, I don't mean to be playing hardball here, but I'm not very good at beating around the bush. I hate that.
Oh, no, that's great.
I have to be very direct. As a former, I'll put it this way, as a veteran of two organizations, that's the Black Panther Party and the Republic of New Africa, both of whom were targets of the bloody COINTELPRO, the counterintelligence program, which I'm sure I would assume that you're cognizant of,
yes.
the COINTELPRO. Mm-hmm. I take a very dim view of most U.S., if not all U.S. intelligence agencies, because I see them overall as being not merely seeking intelligence, but actually provocateurs based on But I want to. Now, I preface this for. I'm prefacing my statement, or I'm prefacing really I've made the statement now, but I'm prefacing this for my question to you. Okay, and my question to you is that someone who was, I think, quite unique as a CIA asset. And if you will, for our listening audience, we may assume that people know what you mean or what we mean when we say CIA asset. If you could also, in answering this question, which I'm about to ask, explain exactly what that means. It seems sort of self-explanatory, but it may or may not be. The question is this, Susan. Where or how possibly, and please don't take this the wrong way, because it's meant with the utmost respect. How possibly did you think, or hope even, perhaps hope would be a better word, that this bloody, profit-driven system that we have would allow you and others like you to, shall we say, do the right thing for common, everyday, ordinary people? What I'm trying to get to, Susan...
How did I possibly think we could win?
Yeah, the people I'm talking about, just everyday, ordinary people. Yeah.
Well, I will tell you that, first of all, an asset is the eyes and ears of human intelligence. Mm-hmm. An asset is on the ground, direct contact with a target. And a lot of times people are assets and they don't even realize they're being used by U.S. intelligence. I had a need to know, so I did this over a very long period of time. I made contact with my defense intelligence contact reached out to me in August of '93. I met my CIA handler in September of '94. I made contact with Libya in May of '95 and with Iraq in August of '96. So I was used to, and you got to realize, I took two of the hardest countries, Iraq and Libya, and we had, it was pulling teeth at some points. It requires hellacious tenacity, because it was overwhelming odds that Gaddafi would never give us what we wanted, that they would ever agree to move the terrorists out of their country. And even Saddam, when I first started, they were very, very, very suspicious of me. And I'm a woman on top of that. Now, Gaddafi, at least, was a feminist man. But the Arab people overall, they really despise women. So I had several strikes against me. I was an American. I was CIA. They knew I was CIA from the first meeting. And yet, my passion about opposing violence was so deep that they began to see the advantages of cooperation. And it was groundbreaking what we did with Libya. Persuading Libya not only to accept the Lockerbie trial, the greater achievement was getting Libya to throw the terrorists out of their country. And realizing, I brought in Hosni Mubarak I was the one who brought Hosni Mubarak into this equation, because I had given advance warning about the '93 World Trade Center attack, which of course it was FBI involvement, and that's another issue. But I had gone to the Tunisian embassy before the 93 World Trade Center attack, and that had won the respect of Hosni Mubarak and the fear of Hosni Mubarak, because I had called attention to radical Islamic groups inside the United States that were supporting the overthrow of his government over there, and so between Mubarak and Libya, and of course Mubarak had far more, credibility with Gaddafi than I did, of course, but I was able to network all these things together and persuade Gaddafi to rejoin. It was like holding out a branch to him that he could rejoin the neighborhood. And he had a new friend, Egypt. And Egypt's greatest fear was Islamic radicals who would eventually topple the Mubarak government. And so, as we see today, Mubarak's fear was entirely well-founded. And so Mubarak pressured Gaddafi, said, look, if you're supporting these radicals, you're going to hurt me, because they're going to use your territory to attack my country, and I will be the loser. So, what we saw was a dynamic that behind the scenes, and I have to tell you, President Clinton gets a lot of grief. And certainly he did a lot of bad, he made some mistakes on Iraq. I did not support all of his foreign policy, but he was also a man who supported creative problem solving. And it was a very dynamic, high-level functioning. Many people see the Clinton administration as the halcyon days of the CIA. It was the last time when all of the most creative operations could take place, and it was very dynamic. It was a very exciting time to be an asset. And it was on the success of Libya that the Iraqis saw what was happening in Libya. They got very excited. They said, we want you to do the same thing for us. Help us get our sanctions off. So after having built these relationships, and really an asset is somebody who they all knew who I was. That isn't. They knew from the get-go, from the first meeting, they knew who I was. And then they saw that I wasn't going to leave. They saw that I was seriously committed to these values and that I was really working to find creative solutions. And they saw that I could get results. And then Iraq, said, whatever the United States wants, we're going to give it to them. And so the CIA was literally saying, hear this, hear this, hear this. And it would have been a tremendous success, a peace dividend. What we were trying to create? That all sectors, there would have been job creation for the United States, shareholder profits for the United States, corporate revenues for the United States. Iraq offered to purchase 1 million American manufactured automobiles every year for 10 years because their own transportation fleet, automobile fleet, had been stagnant and had been atrophied since the 1980s because the sanctions had been in place since 1990. So these cars were ancient. They needed to replace everything, and they were willing to give all those profits to the United States. And to be perfectly honest with you, the greatest tragedy is that the greatest loss of all is that we lost the opportunity to see that peace can be just as prosperous as war. We've come to think that peace has no benefits, and war, for all of its horror, war creates jobs. Well, peace creates jobs too.
Yes, but Susan, and excuse me for interrupting Larry, I wanted to clarify two things, but also just on your last comment, it's the question is, who is it prosperous for? And you mentioned
peace would have been prosperous for all of us.
Right, that's what I'm getting at. the people that
peace
don't
would have been prosperous for everybody, but
exactly,
the military-industrial complex is a corporate welfare program.
I understand, and that's the whole key here. You know, who wants these wars, and we've got to follow the money to that. It's not about being proud. That's us, people who see, you know, who have some integrity and try to do the right thing. We're not dealing with those people. The people that are pulling the strings and manufacturing these wars. You know, you mentioned the Clinton administration and the PNAC guys, the Project for the New American Century, and Larry knows of this story. They were pushing for a war on Iraq in the 90s, and Clinton wouldn't give it to them. And just for the listeners to clarify, the sanctions on Iraq, they were going through the entire 1990s after the first Papa Bush bombed the crap out of Iraq in 1991. The U.S. didn't stop killing them, and Larry can talk more about the what sanctions do. We hear the word sanctions, but on the ground, what's the result of these sanctions? And you illustrated it in what happened in Iraq with the hundreds of thousands of children dying and the infrastructure rotting away and everything like that. We do have
hospitals with no medicine.
Yes, and we only have another 15 minutes or so, and if the question, Larry, I want to ask you, did Susan answer everything you wanted her to before I ask her a question I had?
Yeah, I think so. But I want to say this, that I think that we need to understand that all of us, I certainly concur with you, Susan, that in terms of profit, I was so glad, Phil, you made it clear that profit, I use that word in heavy quotation marks, but that peace is profitable. But it's more profitable for everyday, ordinary black, white, brown, red, and yellow people, just everyday, ordinary people. And the story, and I don't mean it in a negative sense when I say the story, perhaps I'll change the word and say, but the description that you have given, which is fascinating, of what actually was going on behind the scenes is not at all what the people in this nation, or for that matter throughout the world, but in this nation, none of what you said are people cognizant of. So,
absolutely. That's why they put me in prison, because they were desperate to try to the fury that I have is that they blamed pre-war intelligence because they lacked, after forcing us into this war, these citizen generals who had never fought in a battle themselves, force our nation to war over the objections of the entire planet. The peace demonstrations before the war were the finest act of democracy the world has ever seen, because hundreds of millions of people across the planet were marching in synchronicity. Our boots were on the ground at the same time across the world, from San Francisco to New York to Rome and London and Spain and fantastic show of democracy. It could have been the greatest victory and a unifying force for this planet. And then the United States would have declared this great victory. They'd already deployed. See, by this time, and this was an argument that was being used. Well, we've already deployed the soldiers, so I guess we have to use them. Why? Yes, we
exactly.
sent ships
but
out
that's the question that every day. That's the question we as everyday people and people like yourself in the government service, people that join the military for the right reasons, like those generals you mentioned. And I remember those generals resigning, whether they were voluntary or they were being purged. These were the guys that actually shed blood in Vietnam, these particular generals. Yes, and they had to be gotten rid of. And they were, whether they, their conscience made them resign or they were purged out of there. But what you're saying, Susan, still failed to stop this attack and this war. And Larry and I had Michael Rivero of WhatReallyHappened.com on our program a few months back, and the title of it is "All Wars Are Bankers' Wars."
Yes.
And I really believe until the American people get past our naivety, I can never say that word, being naive. Yeah, naivete. And follow the daggone money, we're going to continue to have these wars because we've got to follow the money, and there's and that's where the people are. And also like the Project for the New American Century, these guys, and they're still in place. It doesn't matter, Democrat, Republican administration. These guys are still there. They have names. There's plenty of people that, like yourself, who have shared this information with the general public, and we've got to get beyond our idealism and just go right to the criminals themselves. Larry, we're getting up towards 10 minutes or so left in the program. Susan was talking about Libya, and I know the backstory on Libya when she said that they gave Gaddafi. Got rid of the sanctions on that. Part of that was the Lockerbie, and Susan has a lot to say and tell about the Lockerbie bombing, which Libya was blamed for, and it turned out to be our own CIA getting rid of some people who were doing the right thing and found the drug dealing, within the CIA. So these people that needed to be silent. How did the COINTELPRO say it, Larry, when you want to get rid of somebody?
Neutralized.
Neutralize them, yes.
So anyway,
the guy who put the bomb on the airplane on Pan Am 103 lives 6 miles from my house in Fairfax County, Virginia. He has been protected inside the United States. He is the nephew of Ahmed Jibril, but the CIA, there was a rogue team that was getting kickbacks from the heroin trafficking out of the Bekaa Valley. And when the Defense Intelligence Agency, and then again you see I was a DIA asset, and that's why the Defense Intelligence was so keyed into this. When DIA reported it to Langley and said, "Hey, you've got dirty agents over there who are taking kickbacks off the heroin profits, and they're sabotaging our efforts to recover 96 Western hostages like Terry Anderson, AP reporter Jerry Levin, who was the CNN bureau chief, William Buckley, who was the CIA station chief in Beirut, and these guys were held under horrific conditions, and the whole mission was to try to get them out and rescue them. And every time they'd get close, somebody would tip them off and they'd be moved, and it was because of this heroin trafficking. So the CIA was actually putting heroin onto in luggage through Frankfurt Airport and making sure that it cleared customs, and then they substituted a bomb when the CIA Langley sent out a team with the FBI to investigate it. Yes. All of those people were coming back to Washington.
Put them on the same airplane and then neutralize them, as Larry said.
And they bombed the plane. They switched out the heroin for the suitcase bomb.
And at the same time, what people who don't know this history is, and we are running short of time, that's the history was Libya was blamed for the bombing. And then you had all these sanctions on Libya as well.
Well, and the thing is, this is what's so cynical. Originally, everyone knew that Syria did it. Syria and Iran were the ones who did it. But when George Bush Sr. cut a deal with President Assad Sr., Hafez al-Assad, that if he would allow the United States to use Syrian airspace during the first Gulf War, then we would take Syria off the terrorism list, and we would shift the blame of Lockerbie away from Syria onto Libya. So, first of all, how much can you really care about Lockerbie and heroin trafficking and terrorism if you're just callously saying, we don't care who really did this. We're going to go after, we'll just blame somebody else. I mean, I have to tell you that the two worst presidents we've ever had, I think the most dangerous presidents were George Bush Sr. and George Bush Jr. by far.
And Susan, what I'm getting out of this, and what I think Larry's probably seeing pretty clearly himself, is that there are powers that are making a lot bigger money, and the people in government are serving them. You know, and the money is in the drug trade, the money is in war, and again, the answer is follow the money, and we've got to get beyond, you know, the fairy tale of representative government that we've been sold. We're being ruled by a bunch of criminals, man, and that's the way it is.
They don't care about us at all.
No,
they don't care about democracy. They don't care about the people.
Right.
They have no sense of they don't even.
So the next step, Susan, and I'm sorry for interrupting, and I think the country is finally waking up to this. You know, in large numbers. So the next step is, what do? And we've got to follow the money, identify these people by name, and start going after them, you know, whatever way we can.
Folks, I'm sorry to interrupt, but, you know, we're down to about 3-4 minutes left. And as always, I want to remind you to please do a little bit of shameless self-promotion. If you've got a book, a radio show, a website you want to plug, we've only got about 3-4 minutes left, so I want to make sure you don't get off track, off onto other topics when you really should be doing a little bit of shameless self-promotion.
You bet.
Well, on that note, let me shamelessly promote my book, Extreme Prejudice. And it's Extreme Prejudice, the terrifying story of the Patriot Act and the cover-ups of 9/11 in Iraq. And you will come away with you will be horrified to see how easily we could have avoided these wars and how violently and savagely the U.S. government, and it's both parties. It's not, you know, I say that George Bush was bad, Colin Powell was bad. My cousin was the chief of staff to George Bush. I had worked for Senator Ron Wyden and Carol Moseley Braun. Senator Ron Wyden covered this up too. It makes me furious when I hear that he opposes the Patriot Act. He never said a word when his own former press secretary was under indictment for 5 years, refused to stand, stayed silent, and these men lack courage, vision, and leadership. And you have a lot of, and the positive thing is, we have a lot of good people in government, but it's not that the whole government is bad. But if you have, just like we had 85% of the CIA trying to stop 9/11, it only took a handful of people to wipe out all the good things that we were trying to do. Exactly.
And people that are listening can go to your website, Susan, which is, once again, is extremeprejudiceusa.wordpress.com. And there's so much more information, folks, that Susan has to share on Libya, Iraq, and currently on her own program, the Covert Report with Susan Lindauer. You can get some of her programs on what's going on over in Ukraine. But while we still have a minute, we need to also let folks know who don't know about our show's co-host, Larry Pinkney, who does a lot of great work, a lot of writing, a lot of media appearances, and you can get 40 years of his work at blackactivistwg.org. And anything else you want to put in, Larry?
No, I just want to say thank you first and foremost to our audience, and most assuredly, thank you, Susan Lindauer. You have been a real gem. That's GEM for us. Thank you So
yes, thank you, Susan.
Thank you very much.
I know that we could probably talk.
I believe we can do this. I believe we're going to. The thing is this, I want to end this on a positive note.
Okay.
I am grateful for the opportunity that I had, and I'm convinced that it is not a lost cause. There are more of us there are more good guys than bad guys if we help each other. We're just not as powerful as they are, and they're corrupt and they'll do anything dirty to try and but we can push these issues. We're fighting back. There's more awareness now than there ever was before, and that's to our advantage. So let's not give up. It's not a hopeless cause at all.
Thank you, Susan.
I cannot be silent.
Nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something. Everyone must play a part. Everyone's got to go to work. Work for peace. Spirit said work.
I cannot be silent.